ربربية. ربربية صخرة تكسرت عليها أحلام القذاة ومرقت أنوف الاحتلال بالتراب. ربربية قناة إعلامية إريترية مستقلة تطل عليكم بثوبها الجديد وتقدم لكم أميز الكوادر الإعلامية. ربربية نافذة نطل من خلالها عليكم عبر فقرات وبرامج متنوعة. ربربية تقدم لكم باقة من البرامج التاريخية والثقافية والفكرية منها والاجتماعية، وكما تتمنى لكم ربربية أوقاتا ممتعة بإذن الله.
بدأ؟ Okay. Okay, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today's episode is on prisoners of conscience and political prisoners in Eritrea. And our guest is Ustaz Ismail Musa. And we would like to thank you all for tuning in, and thank you for coming, and thank you, Ustaz Musa, for joining us today.
Thank you, Amira, and thank you, Rubia Network. It's an honor to be here, and thank you for having me.
First, we'd like to ask you, so today's interview will be both in English and Arabic. So I'll ask you a question in English and in Arabic, and then you can answer in either language or both languages, whatever you choose. So first, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself, the work that you do with prisoners, the victims and families that are directly impacted by the arrests? أولا ما نريد أن نعرفه هو نبذة عن حياتك وكيف بدأت رحلتك مع قضية المساجين في إريتريا.
طيب, thank you very much. My name is Ismail Musa, and most of the work that I do is with Eritrean detainees. I could label myself as a socio-political activist because I work in both fronts. But more or less, because of the intersection between social and political activities, you tend to be swinging from both, fronts, from both works. One of the main projects that I am really I'm really affected by, and also I'm invested in, is the Eritrean detainees campaign, which is potentially a year-long campaign, but is an annual campaign. And this campaign is to raise awareness about forcibly disappeared. So the word prisoners or detained is actually a very mild word to use to explain and define the situation in Eritrea. Although it's commonly used, so we just maybe we tend to use it. But it is not the right word to use, even in legal perspective. It should be the forcibly disappeared. So it is not a detention, nor any judiciary system that is in place to try anyone who's been arrested. But it's just like forcibly disappeared. So you just people disappear and you don't know where they are. So it is in legal terms, and also there's a convention that comes with this, the United Nations Convention, is the forcibly disappeared people. And the reason being is just the definition for that is very clear, that these are people who are being taken by a person, an authority, or a polity that is taking them from their homes, from their families, just for no reason, but for their maybe for their views. So yeah, so this is where I work. So this is my main interest, also my main drive.
Okay. Yes, I was going to ask you about the difference in terminology, but just in a little bit. Do you mind? Okay, then let's just move on to the next question. I'm going to ask you about.
Do you want me to do that in Arabic as well, or would that be?
I think for the introduction, we could just stick with English, and then I guess, the questions, depending on how comfortable you are. The next question is, could you tell us a little bit more about April 14th and the reason behind this campaign, and what, I guess, motivates you to do this, and do you see any benefits coming out from this campaign?
Of course, April 14 is a campaign that lasts for about a month every year. Not being that detention is not only for 1 month in Eritrea, but it's just like to raise awareness about a specific issue within the whole struggle. That's why we just like specify that month or them 2 weeks or 3 weeks. It depends on the activities to actually raise awareness around on the 14th of April of each year, to tell people about what's happening in Eritrea, to raise awareness about this specific issue. And the campaign started actually some time ago, almost 8-9 years ago, but it wasn't a campaign per se as it is right now. It was more or less a few people just coming together, talking about this specific issue, and then it was elevated to be like a broader campaign which attracts people from all around the globe. And there is a very good reason for us choosing this day to be the we call it the Yom al-Mu'taqal Eritrea, or the Eritrean Disappeared Day. And the reason we call it is because this for those of you who don't know, this marks the very first day that a mass arrest has taken place in Eritrea, and that was on the 14th of April 1992. So that is less than a year from the independence of Eritrea. So it's like almost 11 months, or even less than 11 months since Eritrea became independent. So and there were a few arrests that took place before then. There were people who we identified as being arrested before that date, but we actually wanted to start there because that meant if one person can has a case, but a group cannot have a case, and this group can be identified as a group who belong to a specific portion of the society or part of the society, and that's why we chose the 14th of April. So yeah, this was the reason, and what we do mainly raise awareness, try to make people aware of what's happening in Eritrea. We don't have statistics of the numbers that are in prison in Eritrea or in detention in Eritrea or disappeared in Eritrea, but we do know that there are at least over 20,000 according to the data that we gather and people we interview. So at some point, especially at the bigger prisons, you would have normally at least 200 people in one prison, and you have like hundreds of them. So that would mean that that's the minimum that we can go for is 20,000. But the United Nations Commission of Inquiry had concluded that there are over 10,000. They don't know how much or how many, but they said over 10,000, which is a figure that we can easily say is oversimplified.
Okay. Yeah, I guess we do have reports from Amnesty International and the Human Rights Watch that does say approximately 10,000. Also, going back to your point on the fact that 1992 is the first official, I guess, mass arrest date that we have. Why is it, though, that most of the Eritrean population uses the year 2001 as this big crackdown after the G15, I guess, opposition after the government failed to implement the constitution in 2001, and that was the first time that Eritrea saw the government enforce arrests in large numbers. Why is that the main focus in Eritrean, I guess, geopolitics?
Well, there are two reasons for that. The first reason is some people fail to admit that there were any mishandling of the political situation in Eritrea in post 2000, and that's a very critical thing to look into, because if you believe that the mishandling hasn't started straight after 91, then you fail to see where the problems actually the dictatorship stems from, and that's a very common reason for a lot of people who were probably supporters of the regime in post 2000 era. And that leaves them with the fact that, okay, we were supporting the regime at that time, or we were probably EPLF. And that means that potentially you were supporting a dictator, on the make at that time. So people don't want to admit that potentiality of being supportive of a dictator at that time, or not being able to see beyond things at that time. So that's one reason. Another reason is, I think segmentation of the community or of the population is one the government is an issue that the government has worked on very perfectly, I would say. So if we look into whatever happened in post 2001 arrest, the targets within the communities were a specific people or specific groups or within the community. For example, the 1992 and 1994 arrests were primarily targeting Islamic institutions, Muslim scholars, Muslim teachers, and the Jehovah's Witness. The Jehovah's Witness in all levels, they are inability. Of course, they didn't have institutions because they were banned from institutions. But as a group, we can talk about that. And the difference between them and the Muslim and Islamic institution is just like one, the Muslim almost forms half of the population, 50%. Two, the educational system in Eritrea, which functions, was very religiously motivated in post independence Eritrea. So you have almost all of the schools were under the umbrella of specific religious sect. So within the Muslims, the educational system which operated throughout the country was the ma'ahid, what we call the Islamic institutions, which were serving as religious institutions, also and academic institutions. So for us who actually experienced this and also know about the fabric of the Eritrean society and the historical the history of the Eritrean educational system, we can still say that you cannot exclude these institutions from the fabric of the society. This is how, because, for example, I'm speaking as a Muslim and I'm speaking from a Muslim perspective. If I'm going to speak from a Muslim perspective, Islamic education has a very unique way of attaining both academic and also the religious studies. So, and this is what the government and also a lot of people who see it from outside, Eritreans I'm talking about, fail to see this. I was educated in an Islamic institution when I was a child. And I was given the academic subjects as well as the religious subjects, and they go hand in hand, and we don't see any problem with that. And that would lead us also to the 2017 arrest and the dilemma that we experienced in Eritrea. But let's not go forward there. So there are two reasons. One is, as I said, people are unable to admit that they were supporting a dictator, or at that time, or they failed to see, and admitting that becomes problematic for them. Secondly, the segmentation of the Eritrean community that was done in a systemic way by the regime rendered a lot of people are being victims of even the population. So a lot of people were seeing them as traitors because we had the opposition. We had some Islamic movements were operating outside Eritrea from Sudan and around the world, and Sudan was also operating as an Islamic state. So all of these were actually a narrative was pushed, and that narrative was like, this were Islamists, this were jihadists, this were all of that narrative. It was actually used. Imagine that has been used in post September 2001 era, when even the Americans were not using it. So it was used in Eritrea to convince people that these were traitors of the national project. And in fact, if we see now in 25, 29 years later, Isaias was a traitor of the national project. Yeah.
Okay, so then why is it that even though that was historically the case, that people don't want to admit of this potential dictatorship? Why is it that today even organizations that do try to address issues of like political arrest and political prisoners, why are the people pre-2001 completely neglected or ignored or forgotten, in the sense that they're not even talked about or mentioned by most Eritrean media outlets, I guess?
I guess to be frank with you, for someone who has actually worked in the political arena for some time, it is difficult to actually look into things from the outside and to approach things with a neutral mindset. and that's where a lot of people fail. Majority of these organizations are actually based upon not upon the national interest, but upon the interest of either region or either a group, and that's what makes them different. So for them to push a national narrative, they have to actually try and look into the mistakes of the past. And one, they don't do that. Secondly, for them to advance a regional project, they actually have to exclude a regional or a group project. They actually have to exclude the other as, or they have to identify the other, and that other has to be not be talking about, or maybe silenced if possible. So it's a bit of a dilemma. Secondly, a lot of people are actually stuck in the past, and most of these organizations are led by people who are still stuck in the past. And they're able to see the today or the present time or the future that we might be approaching, and that's the reason. Actually, a lot of people are still debating the fact that whether these people were traitors or not. It was a propaganda agenda that was used to paint all of these people, including the Jehovah Witnesses, to say that they were traitors of the regime. And also, I think some religious convictions or the support of our religious sects are actually stopping us from being neutral, from being just. And what I mean by that is, for example, the Orthodox Church sees the Jehovah Witnesses are potentially not a good Christians, and that stops Orthodox Christians to not support or to not even speak about having a Jehovah Witness who's in prison, which is sad to be honest, and it's sad because it hinders the progress of the country, and also it hinders the work of the people who are trying to push for regime change in Eritrea. And I think everyone who has worked in or who's working in this projects should actually stop and think, what are the impact of my actions or my approach into the bigger work that a lot of people are doing. So everyone is doing their part and you're doing your part, but how is your part hindering or pushing forward other people's work? So if it's pushing forward, that's good. If it's hindering, then you maybe need to reflect upon your strategy and amend your strategy.
Absolutely. I mean, it almost seems counterproductive when you think about it, if you are trying to exclude one group or another. But has there been any attempt into bringing all these people together, and all these people who do work in this circle to come and work together, or has that not even been negotiated, or is that something that's not thought of?
Oh yeah, and there's got to be some attempt, because regardless of where we stand and what we think about issues and events, you cannot build a country without bringing people together. And this is one of the statement that was said to I think the Prime Minister or the Foreign Secretary of the United Kingdom in the post World War II, when there was a conference in Switzerland. So one of them walked out and they followed him and they said, "Are you going to bring Europe together without the Germans?" And that was a very powerful question. You cannot bring Europe together without the Germans. You cannot bring Eritrea together without all the segments and all the fractions of that country. From our part, we try to do our best to invite people to organize campaigns together, because we're trying to extend the campaign from being a monthly campaign or an annual campaign to having events throughout the year, especially when it comes to Human Rights Day or maybe a Detained Day, Forcibly Disappeared Day, the International Forcibly Disappeared Day. So things like that. So we try to approach organizations and speak to them. Unfortunately, it is not always easy. There is still hope though for people to come and work together. For some organizations, there's a limitation of the human power that they have, the capacity of the of their work is very limited, so that makes it difficult as well. So, and also if some organizations are limited by the donors to work in a specific in a specific area or specific project. So there are other factors that contribute to people not coming together, but there is always an attempt, and there should be people should attempt to come together and speak to each other. So and I believe that we are unable to do that right now, but we shall do that very soon, and that's the only way forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you think that there is a lack of, I guess, on spreading awareness on the parts of, I guess, I don't know how to word this properly, but on the other side, so not just following, because you do see a lot of people do talk about the 2001 crackdowns. Is there maybe a limited amount of people who do talk about the arrest that happened pre-2001? Is there maybe a shortage on our parts to spread awareness and bring that onto the surface and shed light on the situation?
To an extent, yes, I agree with that, and I admit that. But let's see into I think there are other factors that contribute to this shortage, and that is, for example, if you see into the Muslim community, for example, let's talk about that. They use Arabic as the main way of communication, and that is limiting in a way to reach out to the people who don't speak Arabic in Eritrea, and also it is limiting because you are unable to reach to the international community. That's one thing. Secondly, I think the people who were affected by this, because a lot of people lived in a war zone for about literally over almost 30 years. In the mainly in the lowlands of Eritrea, and this had actually created a displacement. Although displacement, you can say displacement was common throughout the country, but because you were living in a war zone for a very long time, there's ignorance and independence as an achievement was seen as the greatest thing. It's a relief for people. So having thousands, 2,000 or 3,000 or 5,000 people disappeared is actually nothing for them, and this is done in a systemic way. It's not like someone bombing you using an airplane, or not someone killing people and bring them into the streets and hanging their bodies outside. This is what people used to see in the 70s and 80s. So just like they would bring the bodies of people and lay them down, in the market. They would bring the people and also hang them in the market. And when you see things like this, atrocities, actually this is a genocide that you see, and you fail to see things that happen behind the wars. You fail to see things. You fail to notice disappearances at times, and also there is some sort of trust because this government came as your government, because you've probably seen the other government as the invader, as the enemy, but now this is your government, or you start to maybe give an excuse. Okay, these were people who were they probably committed some crime. They probably did that. And no one is prepared to go and follow what's happening and stuff. Also, the security services work in a very crude way. So they actually make people suffer. And if you speak, you might be the next. And that possibility, if that's the possibility, why should I speak? What am I going to bring if I speak? Nothing. So that led to people being silent, and this is throughout the country actually in post 1991 era, and especially in 2001, and also the trauma. I believe is the whole nation is traumatized, and for someone who's traumatized, it takes so long to come out of their shells and speak. And I think that's one of the problems that we face is people are traumatized. And let me tell you this: if someone was born in July 1994, And their father was arrested in December 1994. What would life look like for that boy or girl to grow up in a family where the father, he was arrested? The father was arrested 5 months after they came to this life. They grew up as an orphan. They knew very little until they were 10, maybe 2004, 2005. And even then, they were told that, oh, your father is, he's gone somewhere, because you don't want to traumatize this child. You're just gonna tell them your father is away, your father, is living somewhere else. And then by the time they reach their teenage, maybe they know that their father has now been taken away. By the time they're 16, 17, they had to leave the country, as anyone else. So, and the trauma from losing a father or mother or someone in the family, to the trauma of crossing a border illegally, potentially illegally, which shouldn't be illegally. That's one of the transgressions of the rights of the people as well. So they cross the border, a lot of trauma. They've been smuggled. They probably go to Sudan and then or Ethiopia, and then they had to be smuggled again to Libya. This person had never had a chance to sit down and think about what's going wrong. They had never had a chance to even speak. And trauma after trauma, by the time they're 20, 22, 23, 20, that is the time when they probably had reached somewhere safe for them to start to begin to live a normal life. And that normal life cannot come at all. The reason being is just you are still under the effect of the trauma. And perhaps when you arrive, say for example, they arrive in Europe, in mainland Europe, you denied permit to live. So you go through the asylum process, and it probably takes years and years. So you could reach 20, 25 years without even being able to think for yourself. And then after that, it's just you probably have to not open that chapter. It's so painful that people are denying to open up. It's very painful, and I think people should look into it from that perspective. If you're going through if you've gone through 25 years of your life, from the day that you came to this life to the day 5 months after you came to this life, till the day that you probably say, even for people who went through the education route in some African or Arab countries, if you go through a conventional education route and you graduate with a university degree, all you want to do is just avoid visiting your past, because that would mean ruining your present time, or perhaps your future, because you're going to be it would take you so many years to unpack the pain. And I think that's the reason. And I think for people who are able to talk, they should talk. There are people who are raising their voices from people who've been affected, but it's very little. And as I said, the language barrier is there, the trauma is there, and sadly, people take advantage of the fact that people are not speaking, and they pose as the spokesman, and sadly as well, when you pose as spokesman, you have to. They fail to be neutral and more comprehensive in their approach to the whole issue and dilemma of forced disappearance. So they cherry pick, and that cherry picking is actually affecting the fabric construction of the Eritrean, and also the trust that exists. Dictatorship started back before even 1991, but let's say 91, and it should be seen as that, not as a dictatorship that started in 2001. 2001 was just an event that took place, a turn. Actually, it has a huge impact. I'm not denying that, but it is one of many events that took place in Eritrea. Sorry, I'm probably spoke a lot.
No, that's fine. Okay, so then, do you think that maybe, I'm not so much now, but before, was there a stigma in Eritrea where towards families that have had someone arrested or forcefully taken away? And were they seen as different, or I guess, or criminalized in that sense? Or was there solidarity with
Absolutely. Absolutely, absolutely. I interviewed two ladies actually this year in April, and it was a very sad thing to hear. And I knew about this, but it was also very sad to hear from the lips of the people who actually experienced it. Imagine their father's friends avoided using the street of their house, and that's because the security service actually tell people that these are traitors, these were this and this were that, and they spread this fake news that you might say, and people believe them. So they were internalized by the people, and they think, oh, if I go or if I visit this family or if I support this family, I might be actually seen as someone who is supporting the family of someone who tried the country. And the security service used that very skillfully to scaremonger and to scapegoat others. So they just they skillfully use that. Sadly, that had actually we can say that was successful in excluding these families and not allowing them the opportunity to speak to others and tell their stories, and they kept themselves to themselves. So they were excluded within the communities in the societies, and they saw a lot of people from within their communities. On the other hand, there were people they know nothing about politics, let alone politics. They know nothing about how the world around them function in terms of the daily basic stuff. All they know is just they're animals, they're shepherds, they're animals, and their farm. Oh, that's all they knew. And people like this were being arrested. And I am aware of cases of people like that who were actually arrested, taken to prisons, and died in prison. They knew nothing. They were just and they were actually punished. They were their rights were violated. Anything of punishment that you can think about was any kind of pain that you can think about also been inflicted upon them, and they eventually had to die. And the reason is just that they just wanted them to admit something that they don't know. It was admit that you were. If you are Muslim, admit that you were supporting the jihadi, and a shepherd, who knows nothing but his farm and his animals, is asked to admit that he's a supporter of a network that operates thousands of miles away from where he resides. He barely knows the area where he lives. He could probably travel a maximum of 5 kilometers from radius from where he lives, and you asking that person, you telling that person that they have communication with someone who is thousands of miles away from them, so the stories vary, but overall, especially the arrests and the forced disappearances that took place in the cities, the families were very much so excluded, and a lot of rumors were spread amongst people to not actually interact with them, and that actually was successful, and sadly it was successful.
Yeah, that is very unfortunate. It's I can't even fathom the what they would be going through. Imagine losing your family member and then having to deal with the society at large. But based on what you said and the fact that as the Eritrean government transitioned into getting the power and getting the Eritrean people built a trust and sort of believed in this new government. But would things have looked differently had the Eritrean people held the government accountable from day one, and not just given the trust that they may have, or just kind of assumed that the government was doing it based on their best interest?
I think accountability, the term accountability was there, but not very much. It wasn't very clear for a lot of people. Also, majority of the population was very jubilant, and they were celebrating. the fact that they were an independent country. It's a dream that came true almost 50 years later. From 46, when there was a call for independent Eritrea, for not autonomous, but just like literally independent. That was the call that was there in 1946 and 47. Then you have a country now, almost 50 years later, and that was a generational dream. It's not a dream of just like one person or one group. It was almost 2 to 3 generations had dreamt that they're going to have a country, and then people went blank. They couldn't think, they couldn't see anything, but this achievement, and Esaias was hailed as like the hero, the person who brought that dream, and people failed to see that the people who lost their lives, the people failed to see the people who were displaced and were made refugees. People failed to see when Eritrea became independent, over 500,000 refugees were living in Sudan. Amongst this, a very small minority was able to return. So people were failed to see the villages that were burned.
Right.
And throughout the revolution, there was like actually, especially in the cities, especially in Asmara, people were not aware of what was happening in the whole of the country. It's like things were functioning normally, and this is because this is like the capital where the weight of the Ethiopian regime was, so they actually had to not make it to actually preserve it from any sort of infiltration by the revolution, because this is where they are, this is where the main operation is taking place. And actually, sometime in the 80s, when the Derg actually announced the last campaign, the Red Stars campaign, Asmara became the capital of the whole of Ethiopia. The capital was actually brought to Asmara. So, and when you have the weight of the Ethiopian government actually residing in Asmara, then obviously the security and everything would be of a paramount importance. So what I would like to say is people were unable to see the deficiencies. People were unable to see, but there was a call for a constitution, and that call actually started very early in the days, in 1993, after independence, or 1994, sorry, after Eritrea became independent. So there was a call for the constitution, and 2 years were given for people to discuss the content of the constitution, to draft it first and then to discuss it, and then for the National Assembly to ratify. The process was taking place. Obviously, the problem with that is there was a government within the government. The private party, which was like the secret party, as they call it, was operating from back in the days, from the start when EPLF became a front. What we call the secret party was operating within it, and that's when people who actually really believed in the Eritrean project, in the oneness of the Eritrean, people who were opposed to the civil war within the Eritrean, between different Eritrean fronts, were actually executed, and they were just like given labels. People like Ibrahim Afar were executed. He was like the commander-in-chief of the army, of the EPLF army, but he was executed, and no investigation was taking place, and no one was able to actually follow that up, because the secret party was actually taking hold, and you are invited to be part of it. If you are, active within the front, if you're seen as a potential activist or diplomat or whatever, and someone who could think, then you are invited, and it's another way of actually stopping you from thinking. The moment that you step in, that's the moment when you know that you now, being watched. You now have to follow a specific route. You now cannot say whatever you want to say. You now have to adhere to the rules of the game. And these rules of the game are put by us and primarily by SAS and perhaps very few people around him, but very much so by the SAS.
Right. Yeah, no, I guess. Okay, just moving back though to the main topic here. Could you maybe, I mean, you did talk about it a little bit in the beginning, but could you identify or define exactly what a political prisoner is and what a prisoner of conscience is and what the difference is between the two?
So if we're going to identify, we can say a political prisoner is someone who's been imprisoned because of their political views. And this is also a tactic that's been used by, regardless of what political view that you hold, you shouldn't be imprisoned for that. It is what you believe. It's like it's your freedom of thought should be granted, regardless of what their political view is. And that's the freedom that we aspire to have in Eritrea. So that's the political prisoner. But prisoner of conscience could be anyone who's been imprisoned because of their religious views and their thoughts or whatever, or even because they think this government is wrong. Not because they have a political agenda or they have this political agenda that they're pursuing, but they just think this is where they got it wrong. So and this can be it is a very they kind of intermesh in a way, because it's all about the freedom of expression, freedom of thought. But the difference that we can say is because people have actually an agenda to pursue when it comes to the political side of things. So that might make them distinct from the others. Yeah.
Okay. And in your opinion, or I guess based on the work you've done and the research you've done, who are the targets of these arrests? And is there a common factor between the arrests? And I know a big one is national security. So can you speak a little bit on that?
Of course, maybe in the very beginning there were targets, and that's because to actually have to start with the people who are organized, and that's why we had the people who belong to groups, institutions were targeted in the very beginning, but later on anyone became a target. Any Eritrean became a target. So if we're gonna follow a timeline, we can say in the very beginning, it was about disempowering communities. And that disempowering process took place through closure of institutions, disempowering institutions. When I say institutions, primarily I'm talking about community-led institutions, not necessarily government institutions, because government institutions weren't formulated at that time, and they were just operating as offices as they were operating during the revolution. So we're talking about churches, different sects of churches. So ban of specific sects within Christianity, for example. Even within Islam, by the way, you can only adhere to Sunni Islam. That's it. That's one thing that we don't have non-Sunni Islam in Eritrea, but if we happen to have, then you are banned. So it's very it's something that we don't think about because we don't have it. But if we have it, then we have to actually the ban shouldn't be there at all. Because I believe people should have the freedom to think for themselves, the freedom to adhere to whatever religion that they adhere to. So that disempowerment took place through disempowering the people, arresting people who were figures of the community. So actually, when you arrest, for example, in post-independence Eritrea, when you arrest a teacher, you actually disempowering the whole community. A teacher, although one person, that one person eliminating the life of at least 1,000 people. In a country where the number of teachers was very limited, you are arresting teachers. You see what's happening here, and then the transmission of knowledge, of the bringing up a community that's educated is not there anymore. When you close an institution, you actually destroy the whole community. When you close a school, you're destroying the whole community. When you ban a specific sect because of their religious beliefs, then you're actually targeting a specific group because of their beliefs, and that's not only disempowering, but actually creating an enemy from within. Why should people be banned because of what they believe in? And sadly, other institutions contributed to this, because when you are when you are a Jehovah's Witness or you are a Pentecostal and you're banned, not so many Christian sects, other Christian sects, stand with you. And when we talk about the imprisonment of the Abuna Antonius of the Orthodox Church, we actually need to say to the Orthodox Church, you need to look into your standards. Yesterday was the Pentecostal and the Jehovah's Witness, but today is the Orthodox. And the cry shouldn't start when it comes to you, door. When the problems come to your door, it should start when you see others have been inflicted with pain and agony. And so this is like in the very early days, but after 2001, after the closure of the private media and the imprisonment of the G15 or G11, among the 15, only 11 were arrested, and other journalists who followed in 2005. We can say that everyone is a target in Eritrea, from people who are crossing the border, from people who leave school, kids, teenagers who leave school. As a teenager, you live in Canada, I live in the UK. We see how teenagers, rebel when they reach that age. Some people don't want to go to school, but in the UK, for example, at the age of 16, then after 16, then you don't have to. That's where the compulsory education ends. So after 16, you don't have to go to school, and that's very acknowledged decision. Very educated decision, which acknowledged the fact that teenagers could rebel. Teenagers might not want to go to school. They're going through this phase. But at that time in Eritrea, if you leave the school, then you're going to have to go to Sawa, and you end up becoming a soldier. So and if you fail to do so, you risk being arrested. And some teenagers actually try to cross the border and they get arrested and they are put into prison. When we have minors arriving in the shores of Europe, when we have minors arriving in Ethiopia, then this is the reason. The reason is just because they don't see, they are unable to leave. They can't even live. Like, if you leave your house to even buy something, you could end up, being in a prison, and that's just because someone might be like, what they call Gifa. And someone might ask you, like, where's your card or your student ID card you have to carry with you. So and if you fail to do so, you might be taken to a prison, and from there you might be taken to. Imagine that happened to someone at 16 or 17. I think that's very cruel.
No, definitely, that is very cruel. But just a question for you here. Why is it that well, from what I've noticed, is that the government is very adamant on maintaining the status quo of how many religions that exist in the country? And, why is that? Why is there so much, I guess, so much pressure put on specific religions, and others aren't accepted, like, for example, the Jehovah's Witnesses, and you have the legally accepted religions like the Sunnis and the Muslim Sunnis and the Orthodox. And why is it that, is there like a fear of religions or a fear of like them coming together, or what is it exactly that the government pushes for this binary Christian, Muslim, only specific religions that exist in the country?
Okay, I think there is more than one reason for that. Primarily, as soon as you because forming a new sect is like a euphoria, and people actually do whatever to see that group, together. And when we have that, then you actually your demands will increase. So you creating a sect. This is a new sect. Your demands will increase. You will be asking for institutions. You'll be asking for your own church. You'll be asking for your own. So you form in a community. And the last thing that they want to have is just like having another community to manage, because they are actually micromanaging Eritrea. So when you're micromanaging, the last thing that you want, it's like something being added to you, to the load that you already have on your plate. So that is one of the things. This is my analysis to it. Secondly, most of the new sects were actually found in Europe and North America. Although the Protestants came to Eritrea a very long time ago, the Swedes brought the Protestant sect to Eritrea, and it does exist. But we can't actually, as different religions, including Islam, we cannot deny the fact that there are affiliations to the so-called brothers and sisters of faith around the globe or around the world. So if you're a Catholic, there's like you are seeing the Pope as as the figurehead of your sect, for example. That could be slightly different in other sects, including Islam. For example, we don't have a specific head figure that we could look to as Muslims. Everyone practices the way they see it, but nevertheless, we are affected by the dynamics of the discussions, of religious discussions around the globe, especially in our region, Saudi, Egypt, and the thoughts that come from them. So, and also because we live there, like a lot of our, a huge portion of our communities live in these two countries, so they have different understanding of the religion itself. But nevertheless, Orthodox Christianity and Sunni Islam had been there and exist for a very long time. Sufism is actually supported by the government, and if you remember this year during the Mawlid of the Prophet, it was the first time that was actually the Mawlid was broadcast live on TV, and the reason is just like one, there is a message that needs to be sent. Okay, this is our version of Islam. Secondly, because the problem with Sufism is just like because it focuses on the internal transformation of the person and neglects or actually sidelines, not fully neglects, but sidelines the social political struggles that people go through. Not everyone can be a Sufi. Not everyone is going to look into the transformation of themselves and the spiritual, only focus on the spiritual journey. We're doing the nitty-gritty of the daily lives, and these need to be looked into. And any religion that fails to do so is actually failing to the people, and that's why we cannot have these sects and we can have these sects. It's cherry picking because you actually have to choose the sect or the group that aligns with you or your thoughts or what you or support your micromanagement process. And that's why, as I said, Sufism is very much so supported, and also other sects were supported, and other sects were not.
Yeah, I was speaking to a couple of people the other day, and they were talking about the fact that a lot of people that were arrested, that were released recently from the Jehovah's Faith, were arrested because they were gathering and worshiping. So that's kind of like you deny them the space to worship, yet you arrest them for coming together and worshiping, which is, yeah.
Freedom of assembly doesn't exist. Freedom of assembly doesn't exist.
No,
You're only allowed to gather in a funeral, a wedding, which or if there's like a religious gathering where there's like the Friday prayer or the Sunday prayer or religious worship, which are actually in fact the security personnel are implanted within the crowd. So whatever you do or you say is actually gets reported back to the to the government. So there is no freedom of assembly or freedom of gathering at all. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask you though, what is the difference between these, or is there a difference between the arrests that are considered, I guess, political in nature versus a petty crime? So, for example, theft. And are the people who are arrested for theft charged and trialed, or are they just considered the same thing? And how does that work? How does the judicial system work in the country?
Okay, the judicial system, we have the civil judicial system, and we also have the criminal, and these two actually operate. Obviously, the judicial system doesn't have the capacity to go beyond this basic stuff. So, and this is actually the judicial system that was inherited from Ethiopia, and it was preserved as it was. The Civil Code of Conduct of Eritrea, they issued that, I think, in 2015, a new Civil Code of Conduct. So the judicial system, we have the Islamic laws courts, which are primarily focused on the inheritance within the Muslim communities, because there's a specific way of doing things, marriage, and also divorce, and things which are what we call family law. They are focuses on family law, and that wouldn't have any effect on the political discourse or on the political dynamics of the country. So that's okay. The civil court would take a similar stance as well, because they're actually disputes between, say, for example, two farmers and things like that. And also you have the criminal, like theft and things, as you mentioned, and also sexual assault is taken very seriously. Rape and other things are, I wouldn't say they're taken very seriously, because I believe, for example, if something which amounts to rape should be taken very much seriously, not 2 or 3 years or 5 years in prison. That's actually nothing. But there is like a way to criminalize people, and also try and also imprison people. And these people actually are imprisoned in not in so different prisons, but they are the prisons which are very well known within the cities or the regions where they reside. So this does exist. What we're talking about here is not this process. What we're talking about here is just like people being taken without any criminal offense that they committed, and that's what makes it different. So if you are, say, if you're seen as someone who would like to, who is potentially outspoken within the small circles, not in the community, but within the small circles of friends and people, or maybe small gatherings in a coffee shop, then you are a threat, and you're taken without any trial. So on who the way the trial takes place is quite, so you are tried by the security personnel, and they allocate, the punishment as they wish and they will. And they would be like, okay, you've been tried with prosecuted and with 10 years, 15 years, just like that. Like it's like handing, it's like handing you a banknote and saying, okay, this is like take this £10 and go to the supermarket. It's like, okay, take this 15 years and go to the prison. And how did this take place? No, they would just like tell you, okay, because of the amount of the severity of the crime that you committed, which is treason. Treason is very common. Especially for people who have like who show some sort of discontent with the situation. Is just like treason is the crime that they use. So they're just like, you've been tried with 15 years in prison, 20 years in prison, 25 years in prison, and you don't have to question that. No lawyers present, no court procedures, no any judicial system that operates. Is someone just like, or 2 or 3 people from the security personnel telling you, and you know what's daunting about all of this? For example, I was interviewing someone who was in prison in Eritrea, and he said they were brought, like 3 of them or 4, I can't recall now. So they were brought into this room, and 3 people actually were there. So one is like from the security services. So two people were just ordinary security personnel, and the other one, I think it was in charge of head of the security services. So one of them would read the paper. Because of what you did, you've been, we are going to imprison you for 15 years. Yeah. A couple of years later, these 2 people who were charging these people were actually sacked from their jobs. Because they were because if you were really a judge, there should be a procedure for you to actually even retire. But this is like, ordinary people who know nothing about law, who know nothing about anything to do with criminal law or any kind of law. These are just like people who were brainwashed, trained in torturing people and killing people and doing whatever they can to make people suffer, and then when they done their job, they are sacked. So these are the kind of people that we're dealing with. There is no like so potentially I actually can categorize it as a gang way of operating things. So if you are within the gang, if you are of benefit to the group, then you tolerate it and you used. As long as your benefit is over, then you're thrown out. And that's what they do. And also because they don't want them to be witness against the crime that we've been committed. So they make you feel bad. They make you feel you are part of the process. You made people suffer. So even when you go out, you're not going to speak, because the moment that you start pointing towards them, it's actually you pointing towards yourself, because you are part of these crimes. So that's the problem that we have now. Right. But there is no any to conclude. Sorry, the point. There is no any formal judiciary system in Eritrea, and the Eritrean government doesn't have the will nor the capacity to build that system.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Right. And then, so with what you've said, then there are reports and there are allegations that the country does have official and non-official detention centers. So does this fall? So with the official detention centers, then fall under the civil judiciary system that you mentioned, or is it all the detention centers are used willy-nilly depending on like the crimes? And are these people or the disappeared put in official detention centers, or are they all put in like unofficial detention centers? Do we know?
We actually don't have any exact figure for the number of detention centers in Eritrea, and the reason being, there is always a new detention center. There's always places where they build on actually a daily basis. One of my friends who was a soldier in 98, 99. So they had to actually withdraw during the war, and they had to build a new military camp in somewhere not far from Adarde. So the first thing it was because they were like using as a backup for the military, and it is like withdraw. It was next to the mountain. So when they were building, the first thing that the officer ordered them to do is just like dig a hole like into the mountain. And they were like, "What is this?" And he said, "This is going to be like, where we're going to put this is going to be our prison." So that's the mentality that we're dealing with. So he's not even thinking about, how we're going to make this military camp secure. He's thinking about, where am I going to put the people that I'm going to imprison? So you can't tell where. So this, when we say the official, like Sambal, like the Jufa, these are official prisons where like civil crimes, or criminals who've been tried and went through the process go to. But at the same time, other people also go to, even treason, people who were, seen as someone who's committed treason would go to. But prior to this is actually when they tell you that, okay, you're going to be in prison, and you're lucky enough you've been told that. Even if someone tells you, oh, we're charging you with treason and you're going to be detained for 25 years, you're very lucky, by the way. You are lucky if you've been told that. Even if you haven't happen to have committed a crime, you are lucky, because the alternative, which is the common, is that you're just going to be taken and thrown into prison and no one knows where you are. There are so many underground prisons. There's so many underground prisons and containers. Majority of the prisons are unofficial. They actually part of the military camps, because that's the only way that you're going to guard them. You cannot have a prison where you're going to put 10, 15 officers in a place. But if it is within the military camp, people are not allowed to come close to that camp for a specific radius. So the fact that even them, someone running away from there is going to be very problematic for them. And even if they run away, there's going to be, the guards who are like a few kilometers away, they're going to be caught. So that's why, for example, places like Matar, which is in the desert, in the Sahel region, in a desert area, and people actually cannot run away from there because, one, there is no villages around the prison. It's a military camp, and for the military, it's easy to have access because they're not in prison. They can switch their engine and go to whatever village or city that they want to go to. But for someone who's running away, you gotta, as the moment that you leave, you wouldn't know which direction you're heading. All you want to do is just like run as far away from this place, and you could end up heading the wrong direction, which means that you would die. You would potentially die because one side is the sea, the other side is just like this heaven of land where you just going and going and going. There's no end to it. So, which is like towards the Qurra and the Sudan border, and it's a deserted area, no villages, no people. You could barely find water or anything. So there are so many people who tried to go out from there, and they died on the way. And this is very common. So, and these are not accounted for. So this is the problem with the forcibly disappeared people. So you're taken from your house, you're taken to a prison like Matar, and then you try to run away, and you don't know where you're going. So you're running away. What would happen is you could potentially die on the way, and you're not identified, and you probably have given you a wrong name because you don't want to be identified as the person who was there the year before, maybe, or who was in the military camp. Because if you were in a military camp and then you were taken, you run away from there, and they identify you as that person, the punishment would be severe. So people change their names. So what happens is like we're gonna have so many people who are lost in post SAS, post EPLF Eritrea, and there's gonna be so much pain, and we need to be prepared for that. And people who had families who were disappeared actually need the sympathy from our side.
No, definitely. And then, I mean, obviously, you did talk a little bit about the conditions of these prisons pre-COVID. Do you believe that any changes were made to address the pandemic, to ensure sanitation, reduce overcrowding, lessen the impact?
Not at all. Not at all. Actually, where you eat, where you relieve yourself is in the same place in some places. Some places are, because they're so hard to dig down and have, so they are just a compound. So it's a compound which is encircled. You live there, you eat there, and you just like the sky and soldiers guarding you. So it's like, when you have animals and you just like creating this compound for them to just stay there. Even these animals, you shelter them. They don't shelter these people. So you just like you're there during the day, you're doing all the material stuff, and by the night you just like, okay, this is where you are. It's like get in there. You sleep there, and when some people even like, because it's like you're there in the morning, like you go maybe relieve yourself. Come 6 p.m. you are in there. So you have these 12 hours where you're not allowed to go out. So if you want to, use a bathroom or anything, then you have to, your bathroom is where you are. So it's just like, this is the conditions that people are kept in. So how, I don't expect, and nothing has been done, and I don't expect anything to be done in this during this COVID. Actually, COVID was used by the government to further silence people. To advance the politics of humiliation of the people. So people are not allowed to go out to travel. The limitation, yes, we can give up our freedoms for the sake of the greater good, but people are not giving up their freedoms for the sake of the greater good. People are being stripped from their rights for the sake of the advancement of more control over the people and over the country. So that's what I would say. There's nothing that can be said about in pre or post COVID-19. It's just like it doesn't make any difference to Eritrean sense.
Right, because it is very much imposed on them. However, we did see that the UN suggested low-risk prisoners should be released from, I guess, the prisons to help reduce the or minimize the risk of COVID. And we did see some releases this past year. Do you believe that the government released them based on COVID, for the COVID pandemic reasons, or was there an alternative reasoning for the releases? So we had the Christians from the prison in September that were released after they were imprisonment, and that came as a surprise, but it was reported as a COVID-19 reasoning. And then we had the December 10th release of the Jehovah's Witnesses, as well as the Muslims, prisoners that attended the Hajj Musa protest that were freed. And all these were technically claimed to be due to COVID, or do you believe there's an alternative reason for that?
At all, not at all, not at all. This is just, they actually have to say that because of COVID. COVID's been around for almost 9 months now, and there's a new, like even COVID has progressed to a new, a new variation. So claiming that this is because of COVID is just like another fallacy. It doesn't hold as an argument. Actually, this is due to the war that Eritrea is involved in Ethiopia, and that's the main reason. And if you see into the people who are released are primarily young people. These are people in their maybe 20s and early 30s, which means these are people who can actually fight. which means these are people who are potentially conscripts for the army. Plus, the moment that you're released, you don't have any paper that would, make you safe from being taken to the army. So, okay, if these people were released today and they go to their homes, and there's a raid tomorrow in the house, they're going to ask them about, what they call Mankasasi again. Mankasasi is like, literally means like it's like a permit. For you to be like to leave, you need a permit. Like it's like, a car to be parked needs a permit. For you to stay at home, you need a permit in your own country. So if there is a raid in their houses tomorrow, what would happen is they would actually be asked for a permit. The line is cutting, sorry. Can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yeah. So I was saying, so this is not related to COVID at all. It's just another way of because you are in need of the people that are in charge of these people. So potentially the guards and the people who are in charge of these prisoners are probably going to be called to the fronts to fight. So you are actually releasing the tension that's on the other fronts and creating a human potential for the war. So you are increasing the capacity. So by making these people potential soldiers in the very near future, and also you're showing kind of mercy, or we released you guys, so now you have to come and fight for us. And also the guards could probably. As I said, it is about micromanagement, and that micromanagement you don't want to add any law to you. So now that we are entering a war with Ethiopia, then we have to kind of like get rid of this another law. So this is another like maybe bigger. And actually, getting rid of that law is gonna give us a push on the other side, which that means we're gonna have more soldiers who would be joining. Maybe they would probably not approach them within the first few weeks or maybe few months, but they are there as a reserve. This is how they look into it. So it's got nothing to do with COVID or anything.
Right. So looking into, I guess, any actions taken by the government has to be like strictly analyzed, I guess. Just a question though. Usually we have a lot of people that do wonder why the international community or the world completely neglects or ignores the issue with Eritrea. Do you believe that NGOs and INGOs such as Amnesty International and the Human Rights Watch should be able or are able to correspond with the people inside the country? And do these organizations can they place any pressure on the government, and what role can they play in, I guess, securing peace in the country?
Well, one thing that we need to look into, the international human rights organizations, which is the United Nations Human Rights Council, is an entity with a very limited ability and also a very limited will from its people, because it has the political dimension and the political will of the countries in it, which renders it to an extent ineffective or ineffective in its outcome. The Commission of Inquiry was actually appointed by the Human Rights Council, and it concluded that crimes against humanity were committed in Eritrea, and they went all the way back to 1991. And this is one thing that in our earlier part of the discussion, we were talking about people unable to recognize that there were crimes. The Commission has actually said that there were crimes that were committed crimes against humanity which were committed in 1991, starting from 1991. So one of the things that were raised was one of the recommendations is like to refer the Eritrean government to the ICC, the International Criminal Court, which is something that undoable because the political will of the people who were there, of the government, because it is driven primarily because people have to vote. Countries, actually, not people, countries have to vote. And the moment that the interests of these countries intersect with the Eritrean government's interests, then these governments could block any resolution that would come from the council. That's one thing that we need to see. But also, these countries can be pressurized. We can put pressure upon them as Eritreans and also as international NGOs, like the Amnesty International. The Amnesty International, the problem with Amnesty International is just like it cannot campaign for a whole case. That's the problem. They can actually issue reports and stuff, but they cannot campaign for the whole case. That's why you see them identifying individuals like Siham, like Aster, like David, and they speak about them. It's because they cannot campaign for like human rights in like the whole of Eritrea. So that's one of the shortcomings of NGOs. But nevertheless, Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch are elements of the international pressure group, and they can be used to pressurize the Eritrean government to adhere to the human rights, the norms and principles that law or almost the whole of the humanity had agreed upon. Yet I am not very optimistic, and I would say everything that comes from the outside needs to be supported by the work of the Eritreans. If we fail to do anything, no one is going to be able to move even a brick. And the reason I say that, even if you see the defensive mechanism that's used by the regime and its supporters, it's just like, what do you know about Eritrea? You don't know the Eritrean dynamics. You don't know the Eritrean people. To anyone who is potentially non-Eritrean and is more or less going to be a white person, and that plays into the psyche of like neoliberalism ideology that you're trying to push in Eritrea and all of that. And because they created this argument of like self-reliance, and then obviously neoliberalism has been a very open agenda that encompasses globalization. So it actually, globalization and self-reliance are kind of coming to clash, because any narrative that's coming from a white person is seen as some sort of neoliberalistic ideology or agenda. But the moment that you step in as Amira or Ismail or anyone who belongs to that land, who's actually a product of the suffering of the people, then we can bring a different argument. This is as much your country as it is mine. These are as much your people as they are mine. This is as much as my future as they are mine. And speaking from the perspective a supporter and non-supporter of the regime. So no one can claim, even if they do so, they're wrong. No one can claim that they care very much so more than anyone else about their Eritrean interests. Everyone, has the interest of Eritrea and Eritreans in their heart, and whatever we do is actually stemming from that interest, from advancing that interest. So what we don't, and I see this in actually I think, I don't know if I should say this, but I think we are, in a way, we are still colonized. And the reason I say this is just most of the organizations would try their best to affiliate themselves with someone who is more or less non-Eritrean, white, to prove their approval. And it shouldn't be the case. Anyone who comes to you as an organization, a return organization, can be a volunteer or can be someone who's supporting your cause, but you shouldn't be in need for that approval. I am qualified to speak about my issues and my problems as Eritrean as anyone else, actually better than anyone who is not Eritrean. Because this is, I know the dynamics and nitty-gritty of things better than anyone else. Not only I know it, it is, I lived it generations after generations. And anyone who's coming to the Eritrean, to support the Eritrean cause is just coming as someone who's actually supporting, reading books and all of that. But for me, this is not reading books. This is my history. This is my where I come from. This is how I came to be as people, as a nation. And we shouldn't be looking for approval from someone else or from a foreigner for us to, including, by the way, this mentality of colonization is not only the people in the position, also including the government. The spokesperson is Ruby. You see, the spokesperson is Ruby, who is he's a lawyer who lives in London, from an Asian background. So this is a way of seeking approval. There's another guy that I failed to recall his name from America as well. He's one of the people that they bring. So what I would like to say, that reliance is very much superficial, self-reliance that they say, because they're also in a way affected by the subtle. They still operate under the subtle effect of colonialism.
No, yeah, 100%.
This was
no, definitely, I do agree with that. And also, yeah, there is that very savior mentality that not only Eritreans, but I guess as Africans we collectively have, is where we need, the support of the white man, or the support of whatever, to help us with our own affairs, which is very unfortunate. But do you think that even as diasporas right now, can we even speak on the behalf of the Eritrean people in Eritrea, or should they be able to speak for themselves? And is that maybe something, I don't know, I personally believe that revolutions or anything will start from home. But do you think even us as diasporas, like I've never been to Eritrea, so I'm speaking on secondhand information that I've gotten. I mean, you've been to Eritrea, but you haven't been in like a while. So do we have the rights, or are we still being like are we still using that colonial mindset to impose our beliefs and our ideologies onto the people back home?
No. I think we should. It's actually a moral stance to speak for the Eritrean people. When people unable to speak for themselves, it becomes a moral stance for anyone and everyone to speak for them. It is not about making up stuff. It is about exposing the reality. We are not making up stuff. We are exposing the reality. We see people come in. We have a first-hand account of people. We have stories of people who are arriving, especially if you're in Europe. You could potentially meet someone who left Eritrea 5-6 months ago. If you travel to Sudan, if you happen to travel to Sudan, Ethiopia, or perhaps Egypt, you could potentially meet someone who has been to Eritrea a week ago. And the stories come out because people speak within their family circles. And the moment that they leave, they tell these stories. So it is not speaking is actually could be amounted to a crime, to a betrayal of the people who are inside. They see hope in us, or in don't underestimate what you're doing today, right now, for example. It is something that's been monitored by the regime to scale that you cannot even think of. They actually monitor you, Amira, who's speaking out, very closely. Your activities, your posts, who is following you, everything is monitored. And they only monitor it not because, one, because you are exposing their crimes. Secondly, because it actually hits them on where it hurts. And it's disempowering them. And the only reason that we are unable to attain that freedom that we're looking for is because we kept silence for a very long time. The colonial mindset that I was talking about is completely different from us as someone as people who belong to the country, because you perhaps have first cousins inside the country. You perhaps have a very close family member who traveled to Eritrea very recently. So although you haven't been in a very long time, you know someone who's been there. You know these stories. More than that, you could potentially know someone who passed away and your family were unable to go there and see them while they were alive, just because your family couldn't go, maybe. And that's the case for so many Eritreans. Why does it have to be like that? The fact that me and you were unable to go is something that we need to talk about. It's a problem. Are we on exile? Yes, we are. It is self-imposed. It was probably self-imposed, but it's now. Because it's because of our safety. We can't go there. I would tell you that I won't be able to come back at all. 100%. That's something that's like, you cannot even like negotiate that. It's not something like, no, if you say, okay, I apologize, it's not about I apologize. Why should I apologize? Do I apologize for having, for speaking for myself, for my rights? I'm not going to do so. Why should I, give them the right to enslave me? And if that's how I feel, I think that goes all the way, across the board to people who are inside. People were not able to speak because they can't. Because if they speak, they're probably going to lose their lives. So they're living with the hope that tomorrow will be better. Things will change. And we know what tomorrow means for us. We lived with tomorrow for 30 years and then independence came. Tomorrow will come better. And now we live for 30 years, another 30 years with the hope that tomorrow will be better. That tomorrow might not be tomorrow the next day, but it is tomorrow where the things will change. And it will definitely change. And if anyone has any doubts about the fact that this regime will one day collapse and go, then they actually need to look in the state of their mind. Literally like that. That's how I would put it. It's just like they are either not in a good state of mind, or they are they don't know history.
Right. I have a comment here that I have to mention, and this is from Ustaz Saleh Hanjaba. And he's talking about, I'm not sure if you know this, but I will explain after. After the uprising of 2009, what happened to the innocent people in Rubrubia is unbelievable. The junta starved and imprisoned the innocent people without any reason. Now, I don't know if you know, but even this network, Rubrubia network, has a very significant history. In 2009, there was an uprising in the I guess, hills or mountains of Rubrubia, and all the people that were uprising were killed, arrested, and, like literally mercilessly killed. So even if they do speak up from back home, it's definitely something that will be shut down, and, they will be targeted, definitely. So I'm not sure if you were aware of the history, but this is why this whole network was started, was to celebrate the anniversary of the people in Rubrubia. Right, so moving on.
It's one of the issues, like especially the issues. It's one of the issues of land that we actually struggle with, and it's something that hasn't been resolved. What happened in either Rubrubia, and you need to look into the history and who was used to silence these people, the intervention and all of that. So I think this issue of using someone from the same people to silence the people is an issue that was used skillfully by the regime. So yeah, I have some information about that incident, and I know about what happened. So yeah, it is one of the rights that we probably need to mention here quickly. Sorry, before you go, the next question is the issue of land is something that needs to be resolved in Eritrea, because we have the way lands were possessed in Eritrea, or was a communal ownership of a specific area of land. But the fact that the government said, okay, this is the land is owned by the government and you don't have any rights over it, it's actually bringing a new socio-demographical change in a way, a demographical change and also a social change, which could potentially bring a lot of tension in post-SIS Eritrea. And I speak very much about post-SIS Eritrea because I'm convicted. I have the conviction that this regime won't last long. So we are actually, approaching post-SIS era very fastly.
Absolutely. I was going to ask you about the current situation with the TPLF and the Ethiopian politics, and what your thoughts are of that, if you have any, and how that will affect Eritrea. I've spoken to a few supporters of the government, and they claim that the TPLF, without a doubt, is our biggest enemy. However, they do say that the SIS is going to step down in 2-3 years after this transition. He's just waiting to see how the situation goes. So could you speak a little bit about that?
When you build in a country or a nation, it should be built upon the interests of the country, not upon the interests of a person. Of course, that's not the case in Eritrea. TPLF is lost most of its control over the Tigray region. And the question is, has TPLF mismanaged the whole Eritrean opposition issue? Have they given SIS more space or more time? When these are questions that are coming out now, like, did they mishandle it? Did they get it wrong? I believe they got it wrong because they were unable to trust the Eritrean positions, but they got it wrong overall. But now, I don't think TPLF is just going to disappear like that. And that's what SIS thinks, or whoever thinks. But what I'm still waiting to see is forging an Eritrean narrative for what's happening in Ethiopia. Because what happened was, you are either a supporter of SIS, or seen as a supporter of SIS, or a complete supporter of TPLF and being on the side of TPLF. If things are to go back to normal, TPLF is an Ethiopian organization, not an Eritrean organization. And what people need to understand is, SIS is our enemy, yes, but where we need to actually be existent, we have to be there, and then we say, okay, we support TPLF, or we don't support TPLF. But throwing yourself, your interest, your organizations, everything that you have behind the TPLF, and not actually behind the TPLF, just like on the hands of the TPLF, on the exposures, is a very it's not the right thing to do, neither the strategic approach that we should have. On the other hand, does SIS care about the Eritrean sovereignty? SIS cares about himself. So in between these two narratives, I think that we need to forge the Eritrean narrative, which is, we need to get rid of SIS, we at the same time we need to see TPLF as an Ethiopian organization that should be operating within Ethiopia. We can work together as to, we have a border between Eritrea and Ethiopia, which is mainly the Tigray border, and also the Afar, but the Tigray border. And the issues of border needs to be resolved. There is no point of us not working as two separate entities, but we cannot be one, because you're operating within the dynamics of a specific sovereign country, and I operate within the dynamics of a specific sovereign country. And these two sovereign countries, as any sovereign country, survival is one of the most important things for them. And for me, the survival of Eritreans comes in the forefront of my work and my my thinking. And anyone who would try to undermine that is by me seen as an enemy. I think Eritreans wouldn't care less about the sovereignty of Eritrea as much as TPLF wouldn't. And we've seen that from people who are leaders of the TPLF. Oh, we're going to take control of Assab. In the last years, it was like very childish approach to the Eritrean case, to be honest, from the TPLF leaders. And that's why I say they got it wrong. All they needed to do is just actually tell the Eritrean people that, we support your cause and we can be friends. If we cannot be brothers, we can be friends. But that wasn't what we were hearing, and fragmenting, targeting, fragmenting, trying to actually follow a way of, dividing the Eritrean society. And for me now, the most important thing to do is just to forge a way for us. We need to get rid of SAS, but at the same time we need to ensure the sovereignty of Eritrea. And we don't support the SAS being involved. It is an internal Ethiopian issue, and it should stay like that. And for us, if Eritreans who are in the diaspora or in the opposition, if we are to support the TPLF, not because we like TPLF, but because if there is any strategical outcome, for me, I don't see any strategical outcome at the moment from supporting the TPLF. But one thing that I would say is just the Tigrayan people are being targeted because of their identity, and I really believe in that. They've been targeted because of what they believe in, not because of who they are, and that shouldn't be happening. From a humanitarian perspective, I think the war should stop, and the Tigrayans shouldn't be targeted because they're Tigrayans. If the TPLF has committed crime, the TPLF should be eliminated from the Eritrean politics. That's another thing. But the Tigrayans as people, as a population, shouldn't be targeted at all. And they should have the right to serve the rule and as it is within the federal system of Ethiopia. And it's not for me to say a lot about that, but that's what I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely the innocent people of Tigray should not be impacted by the actions of the elite, because at the end of the day, the elite is always the one that benefit from whatever decisions that do happen in the country. However, there's also been a shift a little bit in, I guess, opposition conflicts from now, where there's a lot of oppositions, like with specifically the Akil movement, and them being supporters of the TPLF, stating that while standing with the TPLF, we can help eliminate the Eritrean issue, which is Isaias Afwerki. Do you agree with that, or do you believe that that's just an agenda that's being propagated by the Akil movement?
I was very cautious about Akil because it actually followed the footsteps of other organizations that were before it, and now I don't support Akil at all, and I don't see it as a potential for change in Eritrea. Because it is led, actually the problem is the thinking behind it is very narrow-minded, very also close-minded, especially what they try to call the Akil Global, and it's very much so a narrative that's been pushed. it follows the footsteps as well of EPLF in a way, because if EPLF was like, it's either us or no one else. The plurality of political discourse is not there, and they, no matter what they say or think, they fail to show it, and for me that's very important. Actually, it's a mass movement, and it should have stayed a mass movement. It is not a political organization, neither a front. And if you are not a political, it's a mass movement, which means that you're going to accommodate. It's an umbrella for more than one view, more than one approach, and perhaps and potentially for people from different political organizations and parties. So if you are that kind of front, that kind of umbrella, then you need to be aware of that, and you need to work within the set restrictions that you have. Unfortunately, people in leadership in so many countries are people who are already in leadership in other parties as well. So you cannot be like, there's a conflict of interest. If I'm a political party, then I'm gonna have to make a stance, either to stand with TPLF or otherwise. But as a mass movement, you don't have to do that. You can limit your work. Okay, my work is working within the Eritrean diaspora communities. Do I have to support TPLF? I don't have to support TPLF, but I can support the Tigrayan people, either on a humanitarian level or on any other levels. And also, I have an interest because I have almost over 100,000 refugees in Ethiopia, including the Afar, by the way, which is something that doesn't come up every now and then. But at least we have almost 100,000 in the Tigrayan region. So these refugees are actually our interest as someone who as organizations who operate on behalf of the Eritreans in a way. But the problem is, Yakel, for example, was meant to bring people together, was meant to mobilize. And mobilization doesn't amount to leadership. And that's where they failed to see. When you mobilize people, you mobilize them perhaps for them to join parties. You can just mobilize people. Okay, we are a movement, we're going to mobilize you, and we're going to give you the information, the awareness. But from there, you need to go and disperse yourselves in the parties and different political organizations that exist, and work from within these organizations. But if you're going to see yourself as the sole representative of the same people, then you fail to do so. In 2011, I don't know if you're aware of this or you know about this. There was the Awasa and the Brigade, the two. One was for the youth and one was for the Eritrean oppositions in Ethiopia. And as a result of that, we had the what was then known as Smar. Smar was the mantra that was used, but actually the Eritrean Youth for the Salvation of the Eritrean Union for the Salvation or something like that, EYSNC, I think. So actually, if you follow the steps that organization has taken, if you trace them back and you try to apply these steps into the Yakel movement, they are the same steps, same pitfalls, same shortages, same actions, same decisions, and perhaps same thinking process. The only problem the only difference is it took for Yakel, it took less than the time that the others took, and that's because of there was a very there was a geopolitical change that was taking place quicker than what we expected, and they had to react within this, work within this, so it took them very short time. But yeah, I hope that the people who are in a leadership position in Yakel wherever it is, like Yakel different countries, and then there's the Yakel Global, to rethink their strategy and also look into where the Eritrean interest is for your Eritrean interest, and then from there you can operate. If you're not there, you cannot support others. So you have to be there first, and then support others. So you have to fight for yourself first, for your survival, and then support others.
Right, absolutely. I mean, it was a bit of a shock for a lot of people that did support the movement beforehand, that had to just switch their alignments or realign themselves with something else. A question about Siham Ali Ahmed. Why do you believe that the government is still able to arrest her, even though she is an American Eritrean prisoner of conscience, and her only crime was trying to flee the country? Why do you believe that the government is still able to detain her? Is he trying to make an example out of her, to state that, it doesn't matter to me where you're from, or, what will the states do to free you in that sense?
Okay, there is a technical problem that the government use, which is if you're a dual national, then you're technically Eritrean as much as you are American. Plus, if you are Eritrean by heritage and you don't have Eritrean passport, you can actually hold the Eritrean national identity, and you can ask for that, or you can make a claim that you're Eritrean and then go to Eritrea without a visa. The problem with that is, if you enter Eritrea without a visa, the only person who can enter Eritrea without a visa is Eritrean national, or someone who is. So if you enter Eritrea without a visa, then you technically, the government can deny your existence. Even like, we don't have a record of anyone, of any American or any Swede, as it is the case for Dalit. It is the same narrative that they push. They never spoke about Siham, sadly. They spoke about Dalit. That's when, after the pressure came out, and they said he was an Eritrean national. In the beginning, they denied, but they said he was an Eritrean national. It is a slightly different story, because he actually worked in Eritrea as an Eritrean, and he was a member of EPLF, and so he was from within the party. So for Dalit, it was slightly different. The Swedes, tried to make the claim that he was a Swede, but they couldn't progress with that line of argument, because he wasn't, like, he hadn't entered Eritrea on a visa. So there's these technicalities, and that's what I would say to people. I know people who still travel to Eritrea, but so I say to them, like, even if you're traveling as an Eritrean, I think you should get a visa, because you're traveling on a British passport or Canadian or whatever passport they're traveling on. That's one thing. Even if you're not like a threat, or if you don't think that you might be arrested or anything, it's just because not that they're going to release you, but at least when people speak for you, then they can bypass this argument of being Eritrean. Anyways. So Siham Ali Abdu was a daughter of a minister. And she was imprisoned when she was 15. Siham was taken to prison just to punish her father, because her father left the country. He was a minister of information. So he left the country. And it's a sad thing for me to talk about today here, because why would a 15-year-old girl be in prison? And when you meet someone who actually rationalizes for that gives you like, oh, because she was like this and that. There is no, she was this and that. Regardless of where your family stand, you shouldn't be punished for your family's political stance. We don't know where she is. No one actually knows where she is. We don't know if she's alive and I hope very much so that she's alive. But as I said, this government doesn't care. In 1992, they imprisoned a father, and 94 they imprisoned the son who was 17 at that time. So we don't know anything about him. So I interviewed his sister. She saw him as her, older brother. She was very young. I think she was 4 or 5. So he was like, her father was in prison 2 years earlier. So this boy was her father. So he was the other member of the family amongst the siblings. So he used to take care of her, and she's still left with this, vivid, at the same time vague memories of that young brother, like a 17-year-old boy. She couldn't let go of that, and that 17-year-old is in his 40s today, and we don't know even if he's alive or not. So it is like it's habitual in Eritrea to take young people to prison. And it's happened so many times, and it still happens. The reason we hear about Siham is because she was the daughter of Ali Abdul, who was the Minister of Information, and I think Siham also she's a girl, she's a woman. That's what makes it even more different. But what we need to think about is how can we reach a point where we say, we need to stop this. Siham could be anyone's daughter. Siham could have been anyone's sister, could have been anyone's cousin, anything. So if you think that if you are, actually trying to advance the human rights issue in Eritrea, and you don't see Siham as being your potential daughter or sister or relative, then you fail to see actually the issue of human rights. Because in Siham, we can see the example of anyone. She was 15, now she's 22 or 23. 23, I think. She's been 8 years now. She's an adult now. She was a teenager back then. She was in prison when she was an adult. She was a teenager. She's still in prison when she's an adult. So age doesn't matter. You are a teenager or an adult. She's a woman. Girls could be in prison as men as well. So it's anyone and everyone who could be a potential victim of anything. And I think I very much so hope that to see her out, it would be not only Siham, everyone who's in prison, to be honest. But I would like to see. I would like to imagine what would have future held for this girl had she been in America. Where would she be now? Would she be going to uni? Would she be like? What was the potential that was there? It's something that you can't. You fail to fathom. It's like these 8 years had passed, and let me tell you this: recovery would be very difficult for her. And the reason being, as a human being, our ability to acquire the skills, the knowledge, the perhaps life privileges come at this age, from like hitting teenagehood to like you are 30. This is the time when you actually learning, doing your education, setting your career path. All of this happen during this time. And if you fail to do that, then you would struggle to even like to do things later on in life, because other commitments would come on your way. Imagine not only you failing to do that, but also there's the package of being in prison and health issues and all of that coming with it. So we don't know what her health situation is. We don't know what kind of torture that she's experienced. We don't know the pain that she's going through. We don't know if if she can still see, if she can still like breathe normally. We don't know where she's kept. We don't know anything. And it's the same for most of the prisons in Eritrea. And I think it's this issue needs to be looked into from a very compassionate lens, not only from the fact that okay, we're gonna have to work for their rights to be realized. Not only that, just like also the compassion. Even if the rights are realized and they come out of prison, then the compassion for us to embrace them and show them some sort of sympathy should be there, and we should be prepared for that, because there's a lot of emotional take and give that needs to be done as soon as this regime goes. I can't hear you, sorry.
I was saying it's a lot of trauma that's attached to it, definitely. I remember we did the International Day of the Disappeared, and we did the campaign where we did the blindfold challenge, and I think I needed 2 days to cope with what the experiences that I faced just in the 30 minutes. So I can't even imagine how much, or even just reading about, I don't know but just reading about the prisoners that from the archive list that you sent me, that was very traumatizing on its own. So imagining being one of the people who is in one of these underground prisons, that's just, it will require a lot of work on our part, I guess, to help rehabilitate these individuals back into society and reintegrate them into society. But definitely, it's a big, very traumatizing experience, and something we can't even imagine.
Yeah, let me tell you, there's I have a list of over 900 people on my desktop here, and I failed to reach most of the people because they don't even want to come out. The people who are families and members. So if you have 900 people, this is just like the list that I was able to acquire. Every single individual amongst these people has a family, and perhaps at least if we say 10 people are the very closely related to them. That's excluding cousins, excluding friends, excluding all of that. This is like 10 people, mother, father, wife, or husband, and kids, and that's all. So this is about 10 people. That's almost 9,000 people are emotionally traumatized by forcibly disappeared people, by the issue of forcibly disappeared people. It might add to that their friends, their cousins, their family relatives, people who went to school with, people who were for people who were in the revolution, people who were fighting with. So all of this, their colleagues, all of these people are actually, this issue actually bothers them. Even if they might be quiet, but the moment they realize, the moment that they see the family of that person, I wonder what happened to so-and-so. It's something that would keep them awake at night. And I believe that happens to so many people. I hope this will be resolved very soon.
No, definitely. And just following up with what you just mentioned, so even the economic conditions, I find that if someone's family member is arrested, like the father, for example, now who's going to fend for the children and, the family and whatnot? But in your opinion, how do you think that we as the diaspora can try to find programs or ways to help rehabilitate the country as soon as, or even before, as soon as we can, if the government is, I guess, replaced or overthrown?
I think that the diaspora needs to come together and create projects. I am kind of moving away from the work of political discourse, because it becomes just like of a void circle where you're just like talking about it has this, it has this, it has this, and I think that stops you from seeing what can be done. I think we should have a network of different organizations and different projects. We try to work on different issues. Trauma is one of the things that we need to. Healing is one of the things. storytelling. Like I think we are not here to credit or discredit each other's stories, but we just need to tell our stories as they were. There are stories that, like, I at once, there's a story that just like hits me, and I failed to see it because that happened during the revolution. So this sister was actually visiting her. She was a soldier as well, so she visited her brother in one of the camps within within the PLF different camps. So she gave him this the kufia, you know, the black and white. So she gave him that, and she left 2 days later. Actually, not only he died, but he was killed in the most atrocious way that you can think about. And what happened was, she came back that moment that they were about to bury him, and his body was lying down there. And his friend saw her, and all he had to do is just like, he actually physically had to stop her from coming forward, because she didn't know that her brother was lying down there. But she was like, "Hi, hello," and he actually had to stop her from not seeing that, because her brother was injured very much so, and this lady is living with that pain. This is a trauma that she was telling this, and she started crying, but there's more than crying that's going on here. There's an issue that needs to be resolved and healed, and these are our stories, and villages were burned, all of that. We haven't even overcome the trauma of the past, and we have another trauma that has been added. So I think we should work on projects like this, and let people to vent off, let people to tell their stories. It's not you anyone, regardless. It's not your job to credit or discredit stories. This is my story. I'm telling you as it is, as I saw it, or as I experienced it, as I perceived it. The way you perceived it doesn't matter very much, because I am going to believe with my perception, my experience, regardless. So just take it as it is and move on. And that way I can heal, you can heal, and we can be compassionate towards each other and sympathize with each other's stories and pains. I think this is the network of things. Other things is not only healing. Healing is actually a huge project that we need to work on. Also, we need to work on peacemaking. I think peacemaking is missing a lot, and it becomes about you know what annoys me more is people who are actually fighting against the regime are fighting to be in the position of the regime to actually become another dictators. In a way, they might not notice it, but that's how it is.
So by peacemaking, do you mean between the Eritrean people themselves?
Of course.
Okay.
Of course. I'm talking about that. I'm talking. Let's not forget that we are a nation state with different communities, different combinations, and these different communities, these different combinations had not lived together. Even in post the 1941 demand for an independent country was a demand of a post-war reality. Actually, we had this, this land that was governed for 60 years by the Italians. So what do we do with it? Do we need to go to Ethiopia, or do we not? We need to go to Ethiopia, and the only reason that over 75% of Ethiopia of Christian Eritreans wanted annexation with Ethiopia is not because they believed Ethiopia would care for them. It's because they saw Ethiopia as the center of gravity, and the only reason that we wanted independence, the rest of the country, the majority of Muslims wanted independence, just because they didn't see Ethiopia as a center of gravity. They were more drawn into the outside world, regional powers. They were more drawn into the other capitals, into Qahira and Dimashq and Baghdad. And that's why the support for the revolution was coming from these capitals. That's why even later on, this was realized by a freedom fighter, Wadawul Mariam. He was one of the, although he was Christian, but he was based in Cairo. But he knew the center of gravity for the revolution was not Addis, but Cairo, Baghdad, Sana'a, and Damascus. These are the Damascus and Baghdad as the pronunciation of the English goes. So, and we need to reconcile with that. It's a historical fact. Some people saw this, some people didn't saw the other, and reconcile and make peace. This is our past. Now we have a present, and we perhaps have a future together. Also, within that past, we had the 1975, in post-1975, the mass of young Christians who left, who actually defied their families, their elderly, anyone to join the revolution because they believed in Eritrea. And that needs to be taken into account when we see, okay, this and that, when we try to speak about the other, let's just see the whole picture and have a holistic approach. And instead of saying, oh, all the Muslims, oh, all the Christians, I think this wouldn't help anyone. We need to see, we got it wrong here, we got it right here. This wrong, we admit it, let's move on. And this was right, well done, thumbs up. Let's take that right thing to the, to today, to make even more right things instead of just saying, pointing towards each other. So peacemaking amongst Eritreans. This is what I mean. Not
absolutely, especially with like the intergenerational trauma that you talked about. Definitely something that needs to be addressed. And I think we do have a lot of capable individuals here in the West that can inevitably go back and help the Eritrean community heal, I guess, from this intergenerational trauma that we experienced. Sorry, I know it's been it's taken a long time, but our last question is regarding the women in prison systems in Eritrea, because we don't have a lot of people that talk about women in the prison systems, and if there are any, we've talked about Siham, but because most of the time we do talk about a lot of the men that have imprisoned, but not the women. And is there a reason for that?
There is a reason for that. Number one, the number is not that big, so you fail to get account of what's happening. Number two, the reason they target men is just because they are a potential threat, as opposed to women. They are seen as a potential threat, as opposed to women who are not seen as a potential threat. Number three, if we look into the exodus of youngsters, majority is men, and the reason is a lot of women actually try to. There are some other ways that people avoid going to Sawa, for example, amongst the women, and also which is marriage. I see this as a huge problem because we are. It's just like you're presented with two options. Either one of them is not good for you as a woman, but you have to pick the less bad, the as opposed to the worst. So instead of them going to Sawa and maybe suffering, they would probably see a potential in just being married and then having children, and then your life more or less stops there. So guys, And imagine if things go for like 10, 15 years. So for those women who took that decision back in 2000 or maybe 2001, now it's almost 20 years. So their life stopped when they were like maybe 17, 18. And it's been 20 years now. And they perhaps have 4 or 5 kids. And they're still mentally in that, she's still that 19-year-old girl who made this decision not because she wants kids, but because she was trying to avoid being taken to a military camp. And so when it comes to prison, I think there are women in prison, especially for example, we have Esther, the 2 Esters that are in prison. We don't know anything about them. One of them returned from America to find out about her husband's situation when he was in prison, and she was arrested. And since then, we don't know where she is. Also, because of the complexity that come with the facilities, they tend not to imprison women. And overall, I guess because the number is less, you fail to get more information. And most of the people who are leaving the country are the men. So the men will tell you about, because the prisons are not together, they're excluded from each other. The men will tell you about what is actually happening in the men section of the prisons, but they are unable to tell you about what's happening in the women's section of the prisons. And that's and the women who are in prison, we don't know very much about them. And I guess it is something that we need to dig deep down upon to find out what's happening and to see if we can get more information. Throughout the years, I haven't found, I haven't actually interviewed a woman or spoken to a woman who was in prison. Maybe I tried my best to reach out to anyone, but I couldn't find a potential. I actually met women who were in the military, but not in prison. So in the military it's easy to find, but in the prison I couldn't find anyone in the diaspora. And maybe it's just because they either don't want to talk about it, but there's also stigma. If anything that like that happened, she'd probably keep it to herself. Like, overall prison is a stigma within our community, and also I think it's internationally it's seen as a stigma, and even that's why one of the most difficult things for men is to speak about it. How about women in a community which is very conservative, very patriarchal in a way? So it becomes even worse. Speaking about women's imprisonment, but I hope there are sisters who are watching this to come out and tell their stories, even in a written format, in any format. Even if they don't want to disclose themselves, they can just do it. Even they can wear niqab or whatever, or even in whatever way, shape, or format, they can just do a voice. Like there are many radio stations out there they can do it with. Even they can do it here in this network. So they are more than welcome to do it anywhere, but at least they tell their story. They don't have to disclose themselves. They don't have to disclose their identity. They can tell the story as it happened, and at least we can have a view of what's happening in women's prisons in Eritrea and how they were treated and the kind of atrocity that they experienced. And that's why I can just say about that, because I to be honest with you, I failed to find women who were in prisons and to give you first-hand account of any information about what goes in there.
No, absolutely. And I have heard of stories of women who were arrested in large numbers because they did not want to send their daughters to Sawa. And I think this was pre-2001. So this was like when Sawa was being implemented. There were a lot of women, especially in Forum, Sawa region, Rububia, a lot of them that said no, they're not going to send their daughters to Sawa, and they were arrested. And I I have met people who tell stories of like their family members that were arrested and whatnot. But like you said, it is a stigma to come out and talk about these. Plus, like the trauma, and maybe they haven't escaped the conditions. So that's another.
My cousin was actually she was I think at that time she was 16 or 17, something like that. So she was trying to flee the country, and she was arrested. Actually, she wasn't arrested in the border, so they couldn't prove that she was trying to flee the country. But she was arrested not far from Barentu. She was arrested and put in a prison for some time. And then she was released because she refused to say that she was trying to escape the country, and because that is the time when school was going on. So she said like we were just going to our cousins, and she happened to have a family not far from the city. So it was a bit of there was a bit of lying there, but she actually was released. But I couldn't even ask her. She still lives in the country, so and it's very difficult to ask questions like that. All I could say to her is just like greet her, no more than that. And that's why when you earlier on asked about shall we speak for them, I think we should. This is just like this is like us, we only have the opportunity to speak for them, and that's what we can do. That's the least we can actually speak up for them.
No, absolutely. I think you're right with that. But I just wanted to say thank you for coming on today. Thank you for coming on today. But just based on the comments that I'm reading from the live here, a lot of people do want you to come back for an Arabic segment.
We forgot about that.
Yeah, I guess it's not as easy to have the two languages mixed together, but definitely we'd love to have you back for an Arabic segment, just because this is a very important topic within Eritrean geopolitics, and it's something that we should be discussing. And even if we're not talking about politics, just considering the compassion and just the human rights side of it, definitely very important. So I just wanted to say thank you. And if there's any last things you wanted to say before we end this.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank you and your team for having me, and also I know it's a very a range of issues that we spoke about, more than one thing, but overall it all comes back to the fact that Eritrean issue is a rights issue. Even Eritrea, the independence of Eritrea was based upon an issue of self-determination, which is an issue of right. So this is one thing that people need to understand. Plus, we don't want people to be free to. We don't want to be free from Isaiah to have another dictator. All we want is just like people to live respectfully together under the rule of law, according to a constitution that's agreed upon by all the people. So that's what we are working for, and that's what we should be working for. But in the meantime, we don't have to wait for this. As I said, we need to do work on different projects, healing, peacemaking, and most of all, and I think it's very important, education. I don't mean education just like reading and writing only, but educating the people about different aspects of life, different aspects of coexistence, and also disciplining ourselves to accept different views and different others, the different views which we claim to be others. So for anyone who's looking from outside, regardless of who you are, what's your name, me, you, and whoever we might consider to be like different, they don't see that difference. Only we see that difference, and we should acknowledge that. So I thank you, and I thank everyone who was watching, and stay safe. And hopefully Eritrea will be free very soon, and we at least we conduct this interview somewhere, maybe in Eritrea, face to face. Inshallah.
Inshallah. Anyway, thank you so much for your time and for your insights, and all the information that you've given us. Thank you so much, and thank you to everyone who's watching on Mushahideen. And inshallah, we will be back again next week with a different program. Inshallah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
ربربية. ربربية صخرة تكسرت عليها أحلام القذاة ومرقت أنوف الاحتلال بالتراب. ربربية قناة إعلامية إريترية مستقلة تطل عليكم بثوبها الجديد وتقدم لكم أميز الكوادر الإعلامية. ربربية نافذة نطل من خلالها عليكم عبر فقرات وبرامج متنوعة. ربربية تقدم لكم باق من البرامج التاريخية والثقافية والفكرية منها والاجتماعية، وكما تتمنى لكم ربربية أوقاتا ممتعة بإذن الله.
Babule